Hi everyone, I'm Mary with Mary Greeley News. Thank you for joining me. I have to thank all my Twitter followers for putting up with all my posts about the COVID virus, documenting what's new in the mainstream media, and past events. Those of you that follow me know that back in March of last year, 2020, myself and my family came down with COVID. We all had it very mildly. Maybe 3 days of headaches, hurting eyes, aches and pains and fever, and that was about it. And then, of course, the loss of smell and taste. That still lingers from time to time. Now, new reports are coming out about people being reinfected with the coronavirus. Myself, I am not going to get the vaccine. The vaccine is not a cure. It just prevents you from getting very sick with the coronavirus. You can still catch the COVID virus after receiving one of the two vaccines and pass it on to others. Myself, I do not know personally anybody who has died from COVID, though there has been many people who have died from that virus. I have met one woman who worked with my daughter who did end up in the hospital with lesions on her lungs, and also her husband who came down with the COVID, but I did not know them personally. My daughter worked with the one woman. Now, anybody with any type of illness symptoms at my daughter's work is automatically sent home. They're assumed to have COVID. But here are some of the news posts about COVID. A recent one I found that was posted on WebMD said that nearly 3,250 young U.S. Marine recruits between May and October, those that they were tracking for COVID, 189 of them that previously tested positive for the COVID, 10% of those were reinfected. Myself personally, I am not sure what to believe about this COVID virus. I could give you a dozen personal experiences about why I do not trust anything from the government. They're able to track the movement of the virus because of its mutations. It's been mutating since day one. Now they say that the COVID virus has a new mutation from South Africa that is easier to catch. Fox News has an article that they put out today. It says that the coronavirus patient believed to be the world's first reinfected by South African variant is in critical condition. This man was declared free of the coronavirus about 100 days ago. He has underlying health problems of asthma, history of asthma. He's 58 years old and lives in the Bay Area, California Bay Area. Here in South Dakota, the virus broke out probably back in March, the same time that my family caught it. And it was spread mainly the hot spot between the food processing plant, one in Huron and the other one near Sioux Falls. At a meatpacking plant in Nebraska, evidently 11% of the workforce there is illegals, undocumented workers. And they're currently fighting to receive the vaccination. These undocumented workers think they can be detained or deported for anything. It's harmful, it says here, when you have someone in a position of power toying with people's livelihood. The woman interviewed said she was worried about the possibility of workers and community members being reinfected. Nebraska alone has reported over 6,700 COVID-19 cases traced back to meatpacking plants, as well as 26 deaths. Data from the Migration Policy Institute shows that undocumented people make up about 11% of the workforce at meatpacking plants in Nebraska. There is a group, the family members of these people, called Children of Smithfield, and Smithfield was one of the plants here in South Dakota that is owned by China. Another recent news document says that emails show that Tyson Foods, their sway over Arkansas mayor during the COVID surge at plants. Yeah, they covered it up and said they were doing testing and providing equipment when in fact it was just a lot of stuff that the mayor said that the people that own Tyson actually wrote out for him to say. Late last May, as a flood of reports about COVID-19 outbreaks at meat and poultry processing facilities began to hit across national news. Mayor Doug Sprouse of Springdale, Arkansas, received a request from CNN to appear on Wolf Blitzer's evening show, noting that at the time, the Fayette, Springdale metro area led the nation in COVID-19 cases. The producer invited Sprouse to be on the show to discuss how they were keeping people safe. All his positive speeches were evidently written by Tyson. He even did promotional videos for the company. Another Twitter post from a Freedom of Information Act request showing that the USDA declined OSHA DOL's help in April to investigate the COVID outbreak in meatpacking plants across the Midwest. Now, the Smithfield food was bought out by China in 2013. They had visitors shortly before the outbreak of company representatives from China. Myself would wonder, did these representatives that came at the beginning of the outbreak, January and February and March, did they bring the virus to these meatpacking plants? When the virus first came to South Dakota, it was determined that more than 80% of the state's COVID-19 cases were tied to the local outbreak at the Smithfield pork processing plant in Sioux Falls. The most populous city in South Dakota, Minnehaha County, where the city is located, had reported 1,800 positive cases, positive tests, and 6 deaths. The first person who tested positive for the virus here in South Dakota lived in Dane County, and they contracted it while they're traveling there in China. They were there in late January. That person did fully recover. On March of last year, it was announced that the very first person to contract the virus here in South Dakota that died. He died in Davison County, but he was from Pennington County. He was in his late 60s and supposedly had underlying health problems. You'll remember back then how long it took weeks to get the test results back for the coronavirus. So I'm not quite sure when this person died. First they said he didn't die from COVID, and then later it was confirmed that he did have the virus. It was also reported that the second and third who tested positive, it was announced late Monday on that date back on March 10th. One from Pierce County in western Wisconsin along the Minnesota border, and the other was from Dane County, which is home to the state capital of Madison and the University of Wisconsin. These were the very first people to ever catch the virus here in South Dakota. Our schools here were only closed for a very short time. There was no mask mandate, nothing really strict, enclosures being enforced for a short time during school break, spring break at that time. Businesses were closed, bars, restaurants, etc. It lasted, try to remember, maybe a couple months, the lockdown, and then everything reopened. But even during that short period of lockdown, a lot of businesses went under. All the first patients that had contracted coronavirus had traveled outside of South Dakota, but they would not say if it was necessarily internationally. On January 20th of this year, it was reported that 2 South Dakotans who received the coronavirus vaccine had died. This is still an experimental vaccine. They haven't done testing to any length on the elderly. They haven't done it on pregnant women to any extent that I know of. And I don't think they've done any testing on children. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think they have. It's still an experimental drug. It says one person who received the vaccine never tested positive for COVID-19, and the other previously did have the COVID-19 and recovered before getting the shot. It says that COVID-19 or the vaccine wasn't cited as the cause of death for either individual. Back on April 3rd of last year, it was reported that Governor Glancy, who died from the coronavirus, his sister caught it evidently from him and died within the first 24 hours of showing any symptoms. She was 51 years old. The representative, Bob Glancy, he died, I believe it was April of last year, after being infected by an unknown source. Well, I wonder about that. He died sometime in March after signing an agreement with Taiwan, a trade deal agreement. We all know that China and Taiwan are button heads because China still considers Taiwan part of their country. So he signed this trade agreement shortly after he came down with the virus and died. He passed it on to his sister who was visiting, and then she died too. It was announced this week that 8 representatives, senators in the South Dakota legislature, have the coronavirus. I guess they didn't have it serious enough to know they had the virus until they were tested. So it must be pretty mild cases for them not to know it, and now they're all in quarantine, I guess. Since this outbreak started last year, I have not heard of anyone dying from influenza, pneumonia, etc. Seems like it's now all COVID. South Dakota is supposed to be the hot spot in the country for coronavirus. Our population as of 2017 was 870,000 people. 152,992 doses of the COVID vaccine has been administered in the state, with 103,895 people that have received at least one dose. No new deaths were reported yesterday, but they did have 111 new positive cases. So the contraction getting this virus is going down. We have no mandatory masks. The schools are all open. The bars are all open. The restaurants are open. The movie theaters are all open. And we're supposed to be worried about this new mutation coming from Africa. Another article saying that South Dakota nursing homes COVID death rates remain the highest in the nation, while the providers are waiting for grant money. Kristi Noem is sitting on that money. The state received $115 million that was set up from the $600 million that South Dakota received from the Federal CARES Act for nursing home and other healthcare providers. But only 47 out of 115 healthcare providers who applied for assistance were approved as of December last year, the 7th. As of December 18th, $1.9 million had been given out to various healthcare organizations, not just those who serve the elderly. Yeah, our governor is probably one of the worst governors in the United States. She's also being accused now of using state money, or I should say state aircraft, for tens of thousands of dollars in political travel. Regulators and watchdog groups are also warning people about advertisements for the vaccine received through social media, email, telephone calls, or from any unknown or unsolicited sources. Yeah, some scammers will try phone calls, text messages, or emails with embedded links to try and get your personal information, saying that they have a way to get you the vaccine if you want to get it. Much frustration going on with people trying to get the vaccine for those who have underlying health problems or the elderly. I'm going to be 67 this year. Like I said, I believe we already had it back in March of last year. I do not want their experimental vaccine. I'm not getting it. Another recent report says in recent days, the average number of new COVID-19 cases in the U.S. has dipped below 100,000 a day for the first time in months. Though the number of deaths is still high, as of Sunday, there have been more than 27.6 million cases in the U.S. and more than 485,000 deaths. But they don't tell us how many people have died from influenza, pneumonia, etc. And then I guess the CDC director was on Face the Nation talking about opening up the schools. But of course, many teachers are very worried. My son's girlfriend's mother, she is a substitute teacher. She works every day. She has underlying health problems. She has had cancer in the past. And everyone in their family has already had the COVID virus. I don't know if they've had it twice or only once, but I do know that they have had the virus at least once. Walensky is evidently warning about reopening the schools. It comes as some states have been easing coronavirus restrictions. Montana, Iowa recently lifted the mask mandate, and North Dakota mask requirement expired at the end of this last January. Masks are no longer required in January. Like I said, South Dakota never required it. And myself personally have not met a single person that has died from the virus. I know many people who have possibly caught it, but they were all very mild cases. And then my daughter worked with one person who ended up in the hospital, and they were only there less than a week. And her husband also caught it, and he's home. And then I guess you could say it's a story of a friend of a friend. It's my nephew who lives in California. He had a friend that supposedly died of the coronavirus, and she was in her 20s. But that was probably also in March of last year. While also it's been reported there in the UK, there's been 1,000 confirmed cases of the new variant of the coronavirus. I assume it's the African variant. She said that we now know that about 44% of those in the country is related to the B117 virus. They're talking too about restricting travel here in the United States, specifically Florida. And evidently, in Europe, they've been talking about COVID vaccine passports. I guess Piers Morgan, who used to be on one of the mainstream videos here, was talking about this passport biometric ID for the vaccine before you can travel. He was all for it. One of the comments was, I just don't know what you're worried about. The vaccine will keep you safe, so why do you think it should be forced on other people? Surely they don't take it at their own risk. Why should the vaccinated care? That's true. If you're vaccinated, then why would you care if other people have it or not? Another comment, so hang on. We keep restrictions in place until we have zero COVID. How many weeks, months, or years? Well, it's going to be around forever and ever, I think. It's going to keep mutating. Are you prepared to wait for that? Do we also stop driving for zero road deaths? Delusional you are. Make Cromwell proud. Another article I found about evictions. This comes from Louisiana. Evidently, the judges there get part of the filing fees to evict people from their apartments or homes. How can a judge be fair when they're getting a percentage of the filing fees? In the article, it says, advocates note that justices of the peace, such as Kusiyama, receive a cut of the eviction filing fees, and thus have an incentive to keep the docket moving. Yeah, more cases mean more money for the judges. I was shocked. And then CBS reported how in Lake County, I'm not sure what state that was, they're weeks behind in filing death certificates, which is holding up insurance money and other legal things. You would think that crime rate would go down. In Milwaukee, homicides rose 97 to 189. A 95% increase in crimes there in Louisville. A group of 34 of America's biggest cities suffer a 30% total increase in homicides in 2020, with police in 4 Midwestern cities reporting an increase of more than 60% over the year before, which would have been 2019. I guess there in Seattle, Antifa activists piled snow in front of the police cars to prevent officers from responding to emergency calls. That's horrible. You think about people having heart attacks, children choking, where it's a matter of seconds to save someone's life, and they're piling up the snow so the police cars can't get out. So that's all I have for you right now. If you have thoughts or comments, please put your questions down below. Thank you for watching. Please stay safe, and I'll talk to you later. God bless you. Bye.